Bryony, welcome to the show. It's really, really an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Tim. I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Before we dive in, I just wonder if I could ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners a little bit. Maybe just very quickly tell us a little bit about your background and what you do in the world of primary science.
Yeah, sure. I've been a primary teacher for 25 years, and I started working supporting colleagues developing their science around 20 years ago. I've been doing it as a full-time job for about 7 or 8 years, and I work across the primary science sector and beyond, mainly in Yorkshire and the Humber, but I do work nationally and occasionally internationally as well. So I work with fantastic organisations like the Ogden Trust, Primary Science Quality Mark, and I've worked with other big groups like the team at Surrey in Manchester. I also run my science club with my buddy and colleague Paul Tyler. I'm really involved with the Association for Science Education. It's been a huge driver in my own professional development and learning. I currently am on the Education Group Committee, and through that I've become a chartered science teacher, which was a huge honour. I'm a finger in a many pie person. It keeps me interested, excited, and hopefully keeps me well informed as well, and mean the work that I do to support teachers is drawn from a real wealth of experience and expertise.
And that's why we're so honoured to have you on the show. I can't wait to pick your brains about the perfect primary science lesson, if such a thing exists. Okay, so before we get started, it's the quick fire 5. So I'll ask you 5 questions in 5 minutes, just to help us get to know you a little bit better. Are you feeling ready for the quick fire 5?
I'm ready.
Okay, nice and confident. I like it. Okay, if you could live anywhere in the world for a whole year, where would it be and what would you do there?
It's a bit of a cheat answer because I want to live in a camper van.
Oh,
and the
that's
camper van,
clever.
The camper van is something I really genuinely want to live in a camper van. I want to spend a chunk of time feeling that level of freedom to go places. And it goes back to when I travelled when I was younger. Before I went to university, I spent 3 years living and working abroad, including a 3-month sort of round the world backpacking thing. And that has made me feel reasonably settled in the last 25 years. However, I can feel like the next phase of life arriving soon, and I think a camper van would be a slight upgrade on my rucksack. And the places I would visit that are on like my top. So I want to do the coast of Scotland. I want to go beyond the coast as well. I want to go out to the Hebridean Islands. My dad visited there when I was a kid, and I've just got this thing I want to go. The Welsh coast would be on my list. I'd also magically transport my camper van to New Zealand and do the New Zealand coast. I visited New Zealand years and years ago, and I really want to go back and do more. And if I couldn't get it all the way to New Zealand, it would then be the French coast. I've done quite a lot of living and working and travelling in France, but I sort of feel like I've jumped big chunks that I want to go back and spend some more time with. There you go.
Amazing. Okay, do you have a secret skill or maybe like a hidden talent that you could share with us?
Well, when I was talking to my husband about this, he looked at me and went, and I was like, what are you trying to say? I don't have any. If you're in my family, this is not a secret skill. If you're not in my family, you probably don't know this because it's a family trait. We can all do this. It's the ability to put way more stuff than you've actually got space for in a space that it doesn't fit. So packing a car, for example, you load everything up on the drive and it looks like you need 3 trucks, and I get it in a boot.
Wow.
Packing a suitcase, you lay everything out and I can get it in. It's my maiden family name, McGladdery. If you're a McGladdery, you're a good packer. And it's a well-known thing in our family, but like I said, it's not necessarily beyond our family.
Okay, useful on a holiday, useful for your camper van.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah.
Next question. If time travel was possible, which time period would you visit and what would you do there?
This one made me a bit sad because I think if I wanted to do anything, I would want to go back when my grandma was still here and just do that again. And I always just think, like, whenever really exciting things happen, I go, oh, she'd love that. She'd be so proud of that. She'd be so impressed with that. She was a massive, massive character in our family, and I was just coming up to 21 when she died. And there's just like, she's never met my husband, she never met my sister's husband, my cousin's children, our children, and you just think, she'd have loved them. She'd have absolutely loved them. So I just want to go back for just maybe a day, but just go back to that period of time when that was still a thing.
That's a really lovely answer. Thank you. If you had £1 million, what would you buy?
The camper van.
The camper van.
I'd buy the camper van. Not £1 million for the camper van, but I'd buy a pretty spectacular camper van. Yeah. And I think with the other large remaining chunk, I'd probably build a house by the sea. I think what I've realised is I'm quite drawn to the sea. I don't know if I want to live there all the time, but I think I'd like to be able to go there a lot.
Love it. Okay, right, last question. If you could be an animal for a day, which one would you be and what would you do?
So I would definitely be a floofy kitten.
A floofy kitten?
I'd be a floofy kitten because if you're floofy, people go, "Oh, you're cute." And I'd be a floofy kitten at my mum and dad's house because my mum and dad are really good cat owners. They have a lot of freedom. There's a cat flap. They come and go. They're in the field so that you get like access to all of the things you need to hunt and prey. But then you come back in and everyone goes, "Oh, you're really cute. I know you've just murdered something, but you are really, really cute. Come here. Here's some food. Let me stroke you." So I'd be a floofy cat at my mum and dad.
Yeah. You could get away with anything, right?
Because I look cute.
That's perfect. Yeah. Okay. And that's the quick fire 5.
There you go.
Done. So time to move into our main discussion. And so the title of this episode is, what does the perfect primary science lesson look like in terms of planning, executing and assessing it effectively? So I just wonder what you might think the starting point could be for any perfect or great science lesson.
My first thought was, is there such a thing as a perfect science lesson? I think there are lots of things we consider when planning science lessons with the intention of them being brilliant. But I think by the nature of science, and particularly primary science, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. And I think when things go a little bit awry, it actually is because people are trying to fit a model that should be duplicated for every lesson. So I think to the other core subjects, because obviously in England, science is core, like English and maths. And I think, well, there is a bit of a pattern to how you teach, maths. It does need to follow some sort of, routine. And they're like, well, there is a pattern to how you teach plants, perhaps, but then is that the same pattern that you're going to use when you're teaching space? Or is that the same pattern you're going to... So I think there's too much nuance as a cold, hard answer. So my first reflection is there such a thing? I'm not sure. I don't know.
And I think that's something that we need to explore more today. I guess we're going to try to get to the bottom of that. And, you said maybe there might be some kind of underlying scaffold or structure that we could follow from, but then each science unit might, or even each lesson might pick bits from that, So when it comes to planning the perfect science lesson, what do you think the key elements are that teachers should consider?
Prior learning is really important. It's a really big conversation, is what do they already... As a teacher who's been working in schools for years, I'm really pleased that conversation's finally being had, valuing prior learning. And when you're the science leader, you have that overview, you know all that stuff. But as the class teacher, do you always know what's gone before you and have you got time to care? So you've got to have really good planning in front of you to enable you to connect, like just some bullet points. These are the things they already know about materials, or these are the things they've already learned about electricity. That doesn't mean they're going to remember them, by the way. And how recent was that experience? So I'm picking examples from the English curriculum because it's easy for me to exemplify with that. But obviously, wherever you are, whatever curriculum you're following, the principles remain the same. So, for example, if you're learning about forces in year 3, that's technically the first time they've come across forces in year 3. But actually, they've learned loads about materials and properties of materials in year 2 and year 1, which actually are the foundations of what they've done. So that's quite recent. But if you're doing, I don't know, something like Earth and space in year 5, when was the prior learning for that? There isn't as much. So as a teacher, really important you understand what's happened before and how recent that was, and where this lesson's taking place in a learning sequence. Is it the first one? So I'm looking for some elicitation probably. Is it the middle-ish of the topic? Is it 2/3 of the way through? Is it the end? Like, that's really important, isn't it? What's coming next, and therefore what knowledge about science and of science do I need the children to have by the end of the lesson? The recent EES Improving Primary Science report, recommendation number 1 is all about identifying the vocabulary and then explicitly teaching the vocabulary. So being really clear about which vocabulary is really key for them to be able to articulate their understanding, and therefore, and do they know that language already? So do I have to do some explicit teaching of that because it's brand new to them, or is it stuff that they already know and I'm revisiting and reminding them of what the definitions are? And again, vocabulary about science and a vocabulary of science, because we need our disciplinary, our working scientifically language to be as strong as our content language. Is this a lesson where they're going to undertake some practical activity to help them understand the concept? Or is this an inquiry lesson where they're going to plan or do or review? And then I think the other thing about your planning stage is about focused recording. So knowing what it is that I want the children to produce, and that allows a lot of the clutter to remove itself from your plan. I think that also taps into your accessibility. If you think about what needs recording, you can then think about how it needs recording and how can that be really accessible. Because for most children, the only barrier to accessing science is often their maths. Maths is probably the limiting factor if they struggle with handling data, etc.
I just wonder if you could give us an overview of how you see the structure of the lesson going. How can we get that perfect flow from start to finish?
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up if the flow doesn't go perfectly either. Like, we're working with real humans who have emotions and stuff going on, and things don't go to plan, and something drops, and something's broken, and the slide doesn't work. I think going back to what I said about the planning, the clear and relevant connections to prior learning are an obvious place to start your lesson. I see children starting an electricity lesson, reminding them doing something about the body. And when they don't remember the stuff that they're meant to remember about the body, it totally takes the lesson off track. Because the teacher then ends up reteaching, and then they have 20 minutes left to do the electricity lesson. So for me in science, I feel like there's an opportunity to make relevant connections in science. So, for example, if I was learning about the circulatory system in Year 6 in the English curriculum, the heart, and like, that's a system of the body. The children have already learned about the digestive system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, and now they're learning about the circulatory system. So for me, the relevant connections in Year 6 when starting some learning about the circulatory system would be to connect to other systems in the body. I think there's also an opportunity for that retrieval practice not to be about content, but to be about skills. Do you remember the last time you used a ruler? Do you remember the last time you used a data logger? Do you remember the last time you used a thermometer? Do you remember what are the rules for reading off a scale? You know, like that's relevant retrieval, isn't it? That's relevant connection to. Then there's a hook. For me, I don't want to overcomplicate things. It's a question. It's a question that ignites curiosity and interest. So, for example, what wild and garden plants can we find around our school? There you go. That's enough of a hook for us to go, I don't know. Well, how are we going to find out? Maybe we should go and have a look. Well, I don't know what they're called. What might we need? So that question is going to be my hook into the lesson. That's a Year 1 example. I'm just going to read a couple more. How are invertebrates classified? I don't know. I don't know what an invertebrate is. What's the classification? Like that straight away is going to ignite that interest and curiosity. And if the answer is, I know it, come on then, you can be the teacher with me today. That's great too. I've picked 2 biology ones. I'm very aware. I'm going to pick a physics and a chemistry one. What happens when we mix liquids and solids? Like, I could say, well, I know what happens when I put sugar in my tea, and that's solid and that's a liquid. But do you know what happens? Is that the same with every time I put a solid in a liquid? What if I put the Lego cubes in my tea? I've got a bit of interest there, haven't I? Why do objects fall at different speeds? All of a sudden, I've got somewhere to go with my learning. Then I think you've got your main activities, the doing, like those questions. You know where those lessons are going to go, don't you? You know exactly what that lesson's going to look like. And they will connect to your focused recording that you've decided you're going to have. So maybe the focused recording is, I want them to get some data today, and it needs to be a 2-column table. It's going to be the object and the speed at which it's fallen. I think there's a consideration around group sizes that I, as a teacher, nobody ever had that conversation with me. Group sizes were there's 6 on that table, so there's 6 in that group. There's 3 on that table, there's 3 in that group. And I quite often through professional learning that I do with teachers, I tell them what group they're going to be in. So I go, right, for this activity, you need to be in a partner. For the next activity, you need to be in a 3, and you're on a table of 6, so there'll be 2 3s. And then I ask them to reflect, why did I make you work as a pair in that group? Was that enough people? Was that too many people? Was it not enough people? There's nothing worse, is there, than having an activity that the children are doing that only needs 2 and they're in a group of 6. Because there's just immediately like, oh, I wanted to do that, and they've got, or there's 2 of you doing a job that's for 4, and you're trying to stopwatch and record and say drop and measure and photo. So we've got to think about what those roles are, and perhaps be prepared to be flexible as well. And then the conclusion, the review part of the lesson, is coming back to that question and considering how your learning activity has helped you be able to answer that question. It might also be a connection to what's coming next. But science is messy, isn't it? It's not that straightforward. It's nice. It's a nice, oh, that sounds lovely. Do some connected learning, have a nice question, do some activity, and then connect back. Can they answer the question? Where's the focus recording?
Just wonder if you have some ideas for strategies to effectively assess that understanding of the children during the lesson.
I think to be able to do that, you have to have crafted a lesson that allows you to notice. And if your lesson's been crafted so that you are the boss and leading from the front and the children are copying everything you're doing, you haven't got space in your lesson to notice that they can or can't do something. You haven't got space to observe them using equipment. You haven't got space to listen to conversation. So again, perhaps that's something to think about at the planning stage, is what am I looking for? And for me, what you're looking for is the focused recording. So what are you looking for? So if your focused recording is that 2-column table, then it doesn't matter if their predictions are way off. So I think having a clear focus of what you expect the children to be doing allows your AFL, if you like, your assessment for learning, your formative assessment, your active teaching layer, as the TAPS pyramid refers to it as, allows you to be active within the lesson.
Hands-on practical activities are really key in science education, but I think for a lot of teachers, we find them time-consuming to collect things together, get the right kit together, make sure everything's prepared before the lesson, doing the investigation or the inquiry and all of that within the time constraints. And just wonder if you have any tips on how science leaders can help teachers to integrate these activities more meaningfully without feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think there's some cold hard science is practical. Sorry, get over it. There's a bit of that we need to be really clear on, and science isn't a subject we're going to just print off some worksheets at lunchtime. And it's very hard for children to, let me pick one of those questions again, why do objects fall at different speeds without having some objects to fall and some stopwatches to time them fall? That's very, science is practical. That's it. So there's that. You have to just get over that. But I think as science leaders, we've got a job there to do to support that culture that enables colleagues to see why science requires those practical equipment and why that's perhaps different. But most things needed in a primary science curriculum are what I would call kitchen sink science. They are mainly available from the supermarket or cheaply from online providers. It does require a little bit. It is important that children have got a collection of measuring cylinders that haven't had the numbers grayed out over the years. It is important that they weren't used for painting pots and they've got marks inside them. That there are some stopwatches that actually work and don't just spend the time beeping in a drawer in a cupboard.
Yeah, I'd like to dig just a little bit deeper into building that culture of continuous improvement and around science in general. What role could the science leaders play in developing that?
I think there's a culture around professional learning, and where's that professional learning scheduled in the annual cycle of professional learning in your school. So how many English and maths professional learning episodes happen within a year, how many science ones happen within a year. So are there some regular opportunities, and is the subject leader regularly accessing professional learning themselves to be able to know what's current, what's changed, have they read the EEF Improving Primary Science report, etc. But also providing their colleagues with great stuff to be able to do teaching. If you know about Explorify, does everybody in your school know about Explorify? If you've read a great resource, a great article, or listened to a great podcast, and you've picked up a little gem, probably from one of yours, Tim, then are you sharing that with your colleagues?
Okay, I'd like to dig even deeper. This is the Science Leaders Toolkit. And so you talked about how, the science leader, if they're getting proper support from SLT, can lead CPD for the staff and create that open culture. So what might it look like in terms of the CPD over a year? How many times should roughly a science leader do it?
I think if I was arguing, I'd be opting for at least once a term. I think in reality, you'd be really chuffed if you've got a decent chunk of time once a year. I think there's probably arguments for having something once a term that's a light touch. I've got some news, quick update. I use Padlets a lot as a way of keeping in touch. So I have a primary science Padlet that I share on social media really frequently. That's just like keeping up to date. So if you were a subject leader checking in on my Padlet every now and again, you might spot something and go, oh, there's for example, there's a Signs of Spring citizen science thing going on at the moment. So you might go, oh, that'll be brilliant for year one because they're obviously doing their seasonal change stuff. I'm going to send that link to a colleague. So you might be doing as a subject leader some things more ad hoc and more informally. Oh, but equally, quick, it's Science Week in 3 weeks' time. What are we doing? We need 10 minutes in the staff meeting time. So I think in terms of your professional learning, there's probably at least arguably one episode. Of course, I would fight the battle for far more first and maybe be shouted down to one. But I think that there needs to be that recognition that there's science is live as well. Great science share planning, British Science Week planning. Who would like to run next term science club? What does that all look like? Needs regular support from SLT to facilitate that.
I just caught there your Padlet. So I wonder, is that shareable? Is that something we could share with everyone? And
of course. I used to write a newsletter, Tim, and I got to the point where the newsletter was taking a massive part of my life because I wanted to craft it and write things and then research the thing. And I just, to be totally honest, didn't have time. Obviously, nobody pays you to do that sort of thing. But equally, I'm aware that I am a receiver of a lot of stuff around primary science. And I found that a Padlet was a really easy way of getting that out to people. So it's just simply organised in months. And you can see historically, all the way back, I've been doing it for about 3 years now. But basically, the thing is in the month it's going to happen. Or it's, by the way, this is happening in May, but I've found out about it in February. And there's something all the way through to May 2026, which is the next Science on Stage. So, there's bits and pieces there, but usually a couple of months in advance. So I'll share the link with you after this and you can pop it.
I'll pop it on the description for the podcast. That'll be great.
No worries.
Yeah, okay. So before we wrap up, unfortunately, we must come to an end at some point. I just wonder if there's any final pieces of advice that you feel that you haven't been able to give yet to science leaders or teachers.
I think if you want some support with that stuff and being a leader, undoubtedly the Primary Science Quality Mark programme is the key place to go. That is valid for 3 years. So going back to that every 3 years and going, where are we now? What do we want to develop? And for any listeners who have done Primary Science Quality Mark pre-March 2024, we'll find things have changed really, really radically in that time. Some very significant shifts towards recognising the challenges that has for a full-time class teacher, etc. But very much so, Primary Science Quality Mark is that driver to drive forward teaching and learning and curriculum design in your school based on where you are now. And then sitting alongside that should, for me, always be membership of the Association for Science Education, ASE. And I think those two places are they're going to help you with your professional learning and access to that ongoing. And then there's lots of things out there like the Great Science Share for Schools, like British Science Week, like, of course, My Science Club is an amazing resource if you were interested in developing your own science club at your school. So there you go.
Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you once again so much for joining us today, Bryony. It's really been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much for asking. It was a really interesting one to be asked to think about. So thank you.